Welcome to today's episode of the podcast. This is a YouTube video that I released, but it's all audio content. So I figured that it made sense to release it as a podcast as well. And it's all about pricing and wedding photography and the myths and my unpopular opinions that I personally believe. So hopefully you enjoy, and here is the episode. Welcome to our studio just outside of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, where it is a proper snowy day today. And welcome to Wedding Photography Pricing Myths Exposed. Basically, I started this video, I wanted to do a beginner pricing video, and I started looking at all of the information that was out there that people would probably be learning from, and I wanted to see how I could make mine different. And it turns out I found a lot of it to be misleading or just plain false. So we're gonna go through kind of everything that I learned, trying to learn how to price my wedding photography. If I was to go back to my first year and the way that I did it, there are some mistakes that I made, there are some successes that I made that I still haven't seen really anywhere online. So I'm gonna walk you through all of those, as well as kind of dispel some of the myths that are kind of public knowledge and accepted, but I think are completely wrong. This video is kind of a lead up to pricing month over on Patreon. So pricing on Patreon, we're gonna get a lot more advanced into a lot more topics that go way outside the bounds of here. Basically, this is kind of opening the rabbit hole and telling you what advice not to follow, as well as giving hopefully some tips that will keep you on track and focused on the business that you want to create. Because at the end of the day, happiness in your business is the number one thing that you should be striving towards. If you create a profitable business, but it ruins your life as far as just no time freedom, you don't really want to be in that business. You want to be in a business that generates money as well as time freedom. And I think that wedding photography specifically is probably the best career option out there for creating a life of both financial freedom as well as time flexibility, which I value as my number one. So on Patreon this month, we're gonna get way more advanced into all things pricing. The entire month on Patreon is dedicated to pricing. So hop over there if that is interesting to you. You also have my pricing documents on there, my contract, there's some live first meetings. There's about 150 other business videos. Basically the way that it goes is that all of my photography instruction is usually up here on YouTube, but then all of the business advice and the things that are actually gonna make you money are locked down behind Patreon. So it's $30 for the month if you wanna join. And once you join, you get access instantly to the 150 videos that are already up there, as well as a bunch of other things like all of my presets. And there's a lot. It's probably the most overvalued $30 you'll ever spend. And I hope that you stick around because there's value coming every single month. So as I mentioned, this kind of started from a place of let's figure out what other people are being taught. And I think after reading those articles, it's pretty clear that no one is currently running a successful business, a high volume business at that is teaching these articles. I think a lot of the articles are very outdated, and I feel like a lot of people hire other copywriters. So if you discover yourself on a website that looks like it's just a sales funnel to something, there's a pretty good chance that they are targeting wedding photographers specifically, and they've written this content and they've given a template of another article that has been written in like the mid 2000s or early 2010 or something like that to somebody else to just kind of copy and modify, and they put that up there. So we get this weird surround sound effect of this article that came out in 2005 that was the highest SEO ranking. So I think that's kind of how organically all of these bad informations came out there into the world. But I'm gonna kind of dispel some of the big ones here. All right, number one is one of my favorites. So basically the tip is that I read, not that I follow, is that you pretty much have to add up all of your business costs. So add up gear, insurance, anticipated mileage, fixed expenses, variable expenses. I'll add a few, hiring a dog sitter, and in my case, the number of cans of Red Bull that I consume throughout a wedding day. And then once you have that number, you know how much it costs to shoot a wedding. You add how much you'd like to groceries and whatnot, and then you decide how many weddings you'd like to shoot. So you have that number, you want to make $100,000 this year, and you want to shoot 10 weddings. And now you just charge $10,000 a wedding, and now you're a professional wedding photographer, and life is good. Unfortunately, as you can see, that does not work at all. Regardless of how hard you divide that, if you want to shoot 150 weddings, that's physically, in my opinion, impossible unless you can do daily weddings on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, if you in New York or somewhere that there's a lot of destinations and you can do shorter wedding days. I really think that it's an impossible thing, and this is just incorrect advice. It might be correct advice in the business plan sense of things, that if you're writing down a business plan document and you're bringing it to the bank, maybe that's what they want to see. But unfortunately, in the real world, the market doesn't care who you are. They don't care about your expenses. you have to be competitive and you have to book the work. And by following that model and pricing based on that, you're unfortunately just not going to do as good as you possibly can, especially if that's like your year 1, 2, and 3 strategy, that you're just going to spin your wheels for a long time. Another myth that I see online a lot is you have to be either free or expensive, and there's no in between, that if you're shooting a wedding that's in between those numbers, that you're never going to be valued as an expensive wedding photographer. And well, that might make sense on the internet, and when you read it, and you can, I don't know, there's a lot of things you can read and be like, yeah, that makes total sense. I totally agree with that. And while that does make sense, it doesn't really play true in real life in the wedding market, that we are a series of kind of one-off sales, that every wedding you do is probably a new client. Maybe they've been a bridesmaid or something in another wedding, but for the most part, we are just a series of kind of one-off sales. And by shooting a wedding for $800 last year, and by charging $1,600 for a wedding this year, and then by charging $4,500 for a wedding the following year, you're not, that doesn't seem weird. That's just the natural progression of a business, and people understand that. That said, you still have to be competitive, and you still have to price to actually book the weddings. Another one that I see come up a lot is to know your value, and I feel like this is almost they're kind of coaching you to have an ego about your business before you even have a business. And I think that that's just wildly incorrect. In the beginning, I don't think any of us are really treated as artists. And you kind of have to go through those first 1 or 2 years, maybe 3 years even, just simply as a button pusher, that they might like you, they might connect with you, but at the end of the day, they're not after you for your artistic vision. They're after you likely because you're inexpensive. You're an inexpensive solution to solve a problem that they have, which is that they need wedding photography. So if you really want to create a rapidly growing and successful business, you really do have to remove your ego from the first growing stages of it. That it will be painful. You'll have to do some things that you might feel to be embarrassing, that if a wedding comes in and it's 3 days from now and they only have $400 and it's my first wedding ever, I'm going to shoot that wedding. If they have $200, I'm going to shoot that wedding. If it's a friend and it's a park across the road, I'm probably going to do it for free. In the beginning, I do believe this, again, unpopular opinion, but it is critically important to just get out there and start working. That all of the time and effort and energy that you're going to put into maybe not making a lot of money in the beginning is going to create relationships with venues and vendors, and it's going to build you a portfolio, and you're going to slowly start to understand what you like and what you hate in wedding photography. And 5 years from now, I feel like my goal, and the thing that I teach the most on Patreon, is to create a profitable business that is also a happy business. And in the beginning, your business could potentially be none of those, but understand that you are in the growing stages. I spent, I'm going to say 2, 3, maybe even up to 4 years, because I started my business all wrong. And I was trying to be a wedding photographer and then also a concert and music photographer and have one website together, and it doesn't really work. It worked for like 1 or 2 people, but it really just did not connect with a lot of people overall. I'm gonna get way more into my mistakes in Patreon over this month and kind of give you the tools to just alleviate those problems and just get straight to booking weddings. All right, one thing that I actually agree with, it's on the article. I'm not gonna link to any of the articles, unfortunately. Sorry to pull and kind of talk crap, not necessarily crap, but just correct things, at least from my experience. And I, again, run a business in Toronto, Canada, which I feel like is similar to most other major markets, really kind of anywhere in the world. Obviously, take this advice and figure out what works for you. That's, again, like the huge thing on Patreon is that I don't want to just give you the complete roadmap that it's like, you start here, you do this, you do this, you do this. It's you take and pull bits and pieces that actually work for you, work for your area. If you're in a very small town, things might be a little bit different, and you're gonna have to pull different pieces. But generally speaking, there's a lot of good information up there. So the article that is actually, I agree with point number 1, is honestly critique your work and compare it to others around the area. And then they also put around the world. I feel like we all work locally within a local area, and I feel like if you try to compete with the rest of the world, you're gonna go absolutely insane. So that maybe is my life tip of the day, that if you're on Instagram and you're swiping through and you're like, man, I'm never gonna make it, and you're psyching yourself out, to just don't worry about that. You have to compete in your local area here today in a snowstorm in order to be successful, and you don't have to compete with everyone else in the world. And if you set your sights to compete in the world, that's great, but just know that it's going to be crazy stressful, and it is a lot easier to make a happy, successful business shooting locally. And that's something that I've discovered over a long career, 15 plus years of shooting weddings, that in the beginning, I'm an hour west of Toronto. It was my goal to shoot a wedding in Toronto. And once I did that, I was successful. And then I did it for 2 years, and those are the most stressful and annoying days ever. So I was like, you know what? I like shooting over here. So I changed everything pretty much and priced accordingly to this market, so I was able to actually be competitive in here. I didn't bring my Toronto prices, even though we're only an hour west of the city. It is a completely different pricing model. And again, I will talk more about that on Patreon, but do not stress yourself out by trying to compete with everyone in the world. That is craziness. You are a local business, so treat yourself as such. The point that I agree with here is that to honestly critique your work and to figure out where you kind of fit in. In the beginning, I found a few people that I was like, okay, cool, our stuff is comparable, that's great. I have at least like a small benchmark that I can begin with. And because I was brand new, I just priced down from that. And I just aggressively marketed based on that. And it was successful in the beginning. I booked a few weddings. I booked a few free weddings prior to that. And it was all a bit of a mess in the beginning, but eventually it kind of works out and you figure out what makes you happy to carry forward. So critique your work and just kind of look and see who you kind of mesh with. And don't just copy their entire pricing model, because honestly, they have no idea what they're doing either. That's one thing that I've learned really about every business owner that I've come in contact with, whether it is somebody that is running a business like a wedding photography business, or it's somebody that's running like a huge tech company, that people kind of know what they're doing, but I don't know, nobody really truly like has a full vision on like, this is what works 100% of the time. This is, everybody just kind of throwing stuff against the wall, and whenever it works, you iterate and carry forward. Another point is determine your current business goals. And while I think it's important to have goals, I don't have a dream board, I don't have a dream chart or anything like that. I think that it is easier to live in the day-to-day and to not do that. This can go either way. I don't feel like there's a right or wrong answer here. I'm not dispelling this myth of like, don't use a dream. Maybe I am a little bit. Don't write stuff on a wall and just assume that it's gonna come true, that you have to put in the hard work. And I think by just putting in the hard work every single day and seeing what is working every single day and moving forward with that is the way to generate a successful business and to just generate a volume-based business as well. If you are just consciously in every day and understanding what works and what's not working, and trying not to stress out too much if you're not getting like 20 inquiries every single day and you might get 1 inquiry every single week, just know that the hard work is what's actually going to get you to some sort of dream rather than just writing a goal on a board. Another one that's talked about a lot is creating a pricing list that can cater to multiple different budgets. And while I think that's great, I think it's a little difficult, especially in the beginning when you're trying to get things going. I think you just kind of focus on knowing your place in the market right now, having no ego, and shooting those less expensive weddings and just getting that portfolio, getting those venue connections, getting those vendor connections, and getting just people out there in the world that have had photography done by you, so they're able to tell their friends about you. And people understand that next year when they contact you that you're going to be a little bit more expensive, and you can't just go from being like a $500 photographer to being like $25,000 for the day. You'll price yourself out of that market, and we'll talk more about that on Patreon, pricing yourself out of your local market, and how to not do it, and how to not price yourself under the market and create confusion by couples, that if you're priced way too low and you look like you've been in business for a long time, that people are just gonna be like, but why? What's wrong with this person? Why are they so inexpensive? In the beginning, you can rely on that. You can lean into that and be like, hey, like, this is my first year. When you sit down at the meeting, it's like, here's my portfolio. Here's 2 weddings I've shot. They're great. I'm super happy with them, but it is my first year, and that's why I charge what I do. And people are a lot more resident to that, and people will also just understand, and they'll think they're getting a deal, and they're finding this like hidden gem photographer before they're that $25,000 a day photographer. I don't think anyone charges $25K for a wedding day anymore. There was a time though, there's a time that in California, there's a few dudes out there, and I won't name names, but they literally just price themselves like, it's, hey, we're gonna be a $10,000 wedding photographer for the day. And that was their entire marketing strategy, was that they were expensive, and it worked for a period of time. I don't think it works anymore, but it put them in a place to iterate their business out of weddings into other things, which I think was kind of the plan from the beginning. What else we got? Ooh, don't set your prices too low. Don't set your prices too high. That's confusing information. There's more than I can answer in this short video about that. The last point that I will agree with is that you have to know who your client is. And I think that by knowing who your ideal client is and understanding exactly how to market for them is one of the key things, that if you can be out there and you can actually identify who your ideal client is, and after, again, like the first couple years of working the weddings that maybe you're a button pusher at, that you're not an artist yet, you can figure out the bits and pieces from those weddings that you actually really, really do truly enjoy. And you can start to build a client profile, or at least a mental image of who your client is. And it's very challenging to just like release marketing material and just attract all of them, but you can attract individuals over time, and as well as you can learn to identify when people are a really good fit and when people are a really terrible fit. And I feel like you have to go through the first few years figuring that out for yourself, because otherwise the information it really doesn't stick. I'll touch briefly on the thing that I think that none of these articles and nothing that you'll ever really see online touches on, and it's something that I've already hit a few times in this video, and it is pricing for happiness and figuring out when you're at year 3, 4, 5, what actually makes you the most happy. I specifically discovered that albums, doing printed albums, did not make me happy. It was the thing that I was the most fearful of, that I knew every November after I was finally finished my wedding season, and I was like, I can finally relax and have a week off. And it was in the moment that I was the most calm that I was always hit with like 30 or 40 album orders that people wanted before Christmas, physically mailed to them to show off at Christmas. And that was stressful for me, so I decided that I just didn't want to do that anymore. And now I give my clients the tools to go out and build albums. I've always been an advocate of giving people high resolution files. That was another thing that people pushed against for a long time, was that like if you're giving your clients files, you're doing a disservice to the industry and you're ruining wedding photography for everyone. And now it's just kind of the way that it is. And it was honestly, like, there was a lot of negative feedback by the older photographers, specifically film photographers that were transitioning to digital, that were very, very upset about the way the pricing model changed and that everything became that all-inclusive price rather than actually like hard sales. There's dudes like Gary Fong, I don't even know where the video is. So basically Gary Fong's pricing strategy, or his like hard sales strategy, was absolutely insane. So he would sit down with his couple after the wedding. So he'd go out, he would shoot your wedding for like $50 or whatever the film cost to do it. And then he would sit down with you, you get nothing, you get him to show up for the money that it cost. And then he would sit with you and he'd have all the prints and he'd be like, okay, here's the printing prices, and it would be astronomically expensive. So you go from like this $30 a day photographer to like instantly like you're spending $5,000 to $8,000 to actually get anything of value from your wedding images that isn't 100% visible and kind of discussed prior to the wedding day. And then you're the one in the power position because you have all the images and they want them, and now you have to figure out like the money aspect of it. I hate this dynamic, by the way. And what he would do is he would show them the first image, and if they passed on it, he would literally rip it up in front of them and put it in a pile. And after that, like, everyone wanted to buy everything because it's like he's literally destroying our wedding images in front of us. Insane sales tactic, but a lot of people kind of took at least pieces of that to heart. And I feel like I still hear horror stories every now and then about people doing similar sales strategies, like just those hard in-person sales sessions. And I am much happier to never have to do that. I'm happy to have everything discussed up front, and maybe I make a little bit less money, but my happiness value and the fact that I don't have to stress out about like confrontations like that is, I don't know, it just makes my business life so much happier. So I do recommend that if you read something and you're like, oh, this is how I have to run a business, and it just really doesn't connect with you, that there are other ways that nobody, again, really knows officially what they're doing, and everybody's just kind of figuring it out as they go. And even the instructors out there, even if you see somebody up on stage, or you watch a bunch of YouTube videos, or even myself, that everything isn't going to connect 100% with you. And if I say something that just doesn't connect, don't try to implement that in your business. That pull the pieces that do work, the things that will make you a happier business and a happier life, and to focus on those, because that should be the key goal. I am much happier to take life freedom and time freedom over financial benefit. So that's kind of my dynamic. That when it comes down to it, that if I could run a studio here, I got this is my one studio light. If I could run a proper studio here and I could do like 9 to 5, and I could be packed every single 9 to 5, every like Monday to Friday every week, and make like $80 million this year, but be completely locked to this business, I would not be happy, and I would not do it. Maybe I might do that for a year because 80 million is a lot, but I probably wouldn't do it for long. And then the other struggle is that once you get, it's not necessarily an addiction, but once you get in the stride of just working so much, it's very hard to break yourself out of that pattern. And there's a lot of talk about work-life balance, and I feel like nobody, again, knows really what they're doing with work-life balance, and it's a lot of people that haven't figured it out trying to teach it online. And I feel like the conscious check is that you have to, every couple of months, to sit down, and the more you work, the more you just kind of become accustomed to that, and it's hard to reset that. So every now and then, like, take a mental check and be like, okay, I did work 95 hours this week, and the additional 20, 30 hours that I worked on top of my usual business didn't really net me any more money, or didn't really progress me anywhere. And figure out how to get rid of those hours. And if they're editing hours, you can hire somebody to do that. If they're admin hours, you can hire somebody to do that. Start buying your life back by hiring people to make a happier business life. Another thing that I think is really important is to be transparent with yourself about your goals. That I actually so I was a concert photographer and I was making no money doing it, and I was like, what photography jobs actually make money? I feel like the search terms were different, but I typed that into Google, and wedding photographer was like the number one on the list. And that's why I started taking this seriously, because I was like, okay, cool, I can actually make money doing a thing that I love doing. And then when I actually started doing it, I realized that it's a lot of fun, and you get to hang out with people that put on like a very expensive and beautiful party, which is really cool. And then also the other thing that I enjoyed, being an introverted, quiet human with really not a lot of friends, was that I got to be kind of the eighth person into the wedding party. So I got to be part of this like friend circle for the day. And then I could just go home and relax for the next 5 days after that. So be transparent with yourself about your goals, that if they are to make money, like that's okay. You have to make money in order to live. That is totally cool. Don't try to hide that. One example that comes to mind, when we were in Vegas a couple weeks ago, doing an interview with Jeff Batari, who's the senior, I guess, UFC photographer, as well as the Golden Knights of Las Vegas NHL team, staff photographer as well, team photographer. And because I wasn't really interested in UFC at all, I feel like it's a very combative sport, kind of goes against what my brain, I don't know, just usually accepts as normal. So I wasn't really interested in UFC. We talked with Jeff, and he's just such a passionate, nice human being that I was like, I need to learn more about this sport. So I watched the Conor McGregor documentary, and one of the things that I found to be the most interesting about him is that in the first few minutes of the documentary, he's not doing it for the love of the sport. Like, UFC is a pretty brutal thing. Like, not a lot of people will compete at that level and just want to do it for the love of the sport forever. That his goals and intentions were very specific: to get a nice house, a car for every day of the week, and to retire and not have to worry about money ever again. And if you have similar goals, there are trajectories and career paths that you can go on in photography that can potentially do that. And it is important to identify that early on and figure out exactly what you want to be doing. For myself, the volume-based nature of my business, I love shooting weddings now. It wasn't a thing that came instantly. The first few years were really terrible and I did not like it at all, and it was a paycheck. So I was a button pusher, and I was also there to get a paycheck, so I feel like that makes sense. That all kind of connects there. And now that I've been at it for a few years, I realize that it's a lot more fun to just go out and just shoot weddings and do something that you're good at and make things for people that they really are going to love and cherish for the rest of their lives. So I think that is personally cool. And after all of these years, this would be my job, that if I did win the lottery, that I would still be shooting weddings, that I would maybe be entirely more selective over weddings, and there might be like some sort of interview process, but I would shoot weddings for free. Like, they're fun. I really do honestly enjoy photographing weddings, so I'm happy that I got into this career. I'm gonna end on two more little fallacies, or just things that I believe that are maybe unpopular opinions. In the sales and training manual book of every, I don't know, customer service, department store, fast food place, you'll probably read that the customer is always right. And in my opinion, in a happy business, the customer is not always right. And you have to understand that you're dealing with irrational and unrealistic people a lot of the time, and that in emails, sometimes things just don't connect. And if you can actually talk in person, or you can talk over the phone, usually a lot of the things that are stressing you out or that just aren't connecting actually do end up coming together. But understand that, well, people are not always rational and not always realistic, that there are places you can come to in the middle, that if they want like 5 days of wedding photography coverage, they're doing a Thursday to Monday wedding, and they want all of that wedding photography coverage, and they only have $500, that there is a way that you can kind of be like, hey, this is what I can do for $500. And they can either take that or leave that at the time. And so the customer's not always right if they're telling you that, like, hey, you have to do this work for $1,800. You don't have to do that. That you can just say that another couple's booked you. That's usually my go-to, that if I see enough red flags, or if I just truly don't think that we're a good match, that somebody else is booked in the meantime. Everybody knows it's first come, first serve. And that is the easy parachute to getting out of a wedding day that you don't really want to be doing. This is obviously before the booking process. If there's a contract in place, it's a lot more difficult, and I don't think I've ever broken a contract. I can honestly say I've never broken a contract, but before the contract is signed, probably within I know that they're gonna book within the next 24 hours, I've probably pulled the parachute on, I'm gonna say, 200 weddings that I just knew at that point that they were not right for me. And if they're on like a prime Saturday that I know that I'm going to get another inquiry for and it could be my ideal couple, I would much rather leave that open for them than do a wedding that I was just gonna fear all year. The other thing with wedding photography that's kind of hard is that if you book a wedding and you're like, it's like red flags, but I need money, and now it's gonna be a year of you stressing out about this wedding and dealing with it. So I think it's much better of a solution, and again, much better for life happiness if you pull that shoot as fast as you can. If you see that there are extreme red flags, I, in the beginning, was a lot more open to as many red flags as you want to do. Like, I just want to get out there and work. But as your business and as your career progresses, you're able to kind of wind back on that a little bit. And then I feel like the more you kind of get your presence out there into the world as well, and that you become your ideal client. There's more on this in Patreon. The more you become your ideal client, the more you're just going to naturally attract them, and the easier it gets. And you don't really have to vet a whole lot of people because you're just naturally disengaging from anyone that you don't want to be contacting you and really connecting hard with anyone that you do want to connect with. The last one that I will talk on here, and then I'll let you go back to whatever you're doing with your life prior to this, is for destination weddings specifically. I don't know where this was. I read an article, I feel like it's just the forum and the groups that we're part of, that I got my first destination wedding inquiry ever. And I was told destination weddings are hard. They're taking like 3 days of you potentially shooting other weddings, so you should price them accordingly. And I priced my first destination wedding super aggressively, and somehow they booked it. And I am thankful and happy that they did that. But if I could go back to that moment and realizing how much of a changing point in my career that single destination wedding was going to be, I happily would have done it for free, or for the cost of the trip is free, in my opinion. That now I know that those couples, like if we had a destination wedding, so if you have like 30 people going to your destination wedding, you're usually getting 1 or 2, maybe even 3 free rooms, depending on how many rooms you're booking out. So for them to bring a photographer doesn't really cost any money. Next month is actually going to be all about destination weddings in Patreon. So if you come for the pricing month and you stick around, we're going to talk all destination weddings next month. Going back, I would have been happy. I think it's an important thing to shoot your first destination wedding. It's very much the chicken or the before the egg thing, that if you don't shoot a destination wedding, there's a very small chance that anyone's ever going to book you for a destination wedding unless they're a friend or they know you personally. There are obviously outliers that I booked random strangers, and that's great. But if I can offer any advice, if you do want to like go down south or you want to go do a destination wedding, is to just like, if somebody inquires for it and it's your first one, just like do whatever you can to make that happen. Or in my case, like what I should have done, I had a few friends that actually went and had destination weddings, and I wasn't really invited and I didn't go. But looking back, I should have forced my services upon them and been like, hi, I'm gonna pay my own money to come to your wedding day so that I can photograph your wedding, so I can use you in my portfolio. Is that a cool trade? And most people are gonna be like, yeah, that sounds awesome. So that would have been one thing that I would have changed had I gone back. And that is a super unpopular opinion, because everyone wants to, I don't know, like you're ruining the market if you do stuff like that. And maybe every now and then you take a wedding away from somebody that could have gotten more money out of it, but to create your business, like we're all selfish, capitalistic little individuals in this world on some level. And to get your business up and running, you shouldn't really sacrifice in order to appease some sort of global moral compass of the industry. So those are my thoughts. If you're interested in going deeper down this rabbit hole of pricing, join me on Patreon this month. There's gonna be a lot of content. It's gonna get a lot more advanced than this, as well as my pricing documents and everything are already up on Patreon. So if you're interested in seeing those, you can do that. We'll actually talk real numbers, and we'll put together a pricing sheet and all kinds of stuff over the month as well. So thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. And I hope that everything was in focus, because this was the first time that I used a Nikon D780 for video. And in my testing, it looked like it was fine, so I hope that it was. If not, we got this backup camera over here. I'm gonna go drive home in the snowstorm, and I hope that you have a great day.